Thank you all for coming. My name is Mark Rosekind. I'm a board member with the National Transportation Safety Board. I'm going to go over just a couple of things that we talked about earlier today. I'm really just highlighting three. One is that the NTSB responded to this accident with a 12-member GO team. We arrived about 10 a.m., which has significance later with how much time we've had at the site. So we got here about 10 a.m. this morning. The investigation is being led by Bill English. His last name is spelled English. This is Bill over here. He is the investigator in charge, or IIC, of the investigation. He's a senior aviation investigator from the NTSB with 16 years of experience. Also here with the NTSB team, we have individuals from the Transportation Disaster Assistance Group, as well as folks from Government Affairs and Public Affairs. Before I go any further, on behalf of all of the men and women at the NTSB, I want to express our deepest condolences to the family and friends of those who lost their lives in this accident. And just the last thing from this morning, I just want to highlight again that while on scene here, the investigators are going to be focusing on documenting the accident site and gathering factual information. The NTSB's mission really is not just to look at what happened in the accident, but why. And the why is critical for us to be able to issue safety recommendations so that an accident like this does not happen again in the future. While on scene, we will not determine the probable cause. While on scene, the NTSB will not speculate about what caused this accident. We estimate the investigators will be here on scene about 3 to 5 days. Within 10 business days of when the accident occurred, there will be a preliminary factual report that will be available on the NTSB website. A final report will probably be issued in about a 9 to 12 month time frame. So about today's activities, 4 groups were formed: operations human factors, power plants, airworthiness, and maintenance records. And again, I want to highlight that our investigators only had about 3 or 4 hours on scene today. Tomorrow really is the first full day of investigation. I mentioned the team here is 12. 6 investigators actually got to the site today. Extremely rugged V-shaped canyon with highly irregular terrain. And I'm going to give you some numbers just to try and give you some visual understanding of where the wreckage is. It's about a 150-foot deep canyon. So it's about 150 to 200 feet wide at the top, about 150 feet deep. At the bottom, it's about 20 to 30 feet wide. The helicopter impacted the north side about 20 feet above the base of the canyon, where it is about 40 to 50 feet wide. And I'm using about because these are all estimates, but to give you a feel for the V shape and the irregular terrain. So just to repeat that, the helicopter impacted about 20 feet above the base, where it's about 40 to 50 feet wide in the canyon. Most of the aircraft was consumed by fire. It's largely fragmented, and the wreckage that is available is in a very confined area near the initial impact. Some specifics. Both tail rotor blades have been identified, and they were found attached, not consumed by fire, were the last 3 feet of the tail boom. All 3 main rotor blade roots were attached to the hub, and the blades appear to be securely attached to the hub. The coroner was on scene today, and I'm just going to emphasize again that the Clark County Coroner's Office will be the ones to update you on fatalities and related information. Preliminary review of radar data indicates that the accident occurred at 4:30 p.m. local time. So tonight at 6 o'clock was the first organizational meeting. Organizations that were granted party status to the accident investigation are the FAA and Sundance Helicopters. Additionally, representatives from Eurocopter, representing the airframe, and Turbo Mecha, which is representing the engines, will be working as technical advisors to the BEA, which is basically a French version of the NTSB. So BEA is the accredited representative on the investigation, and Eurocopter and Turbomeca representatives will be their technical advisors. And what's next? There'll be extensive work with the airworthiness power plant groups doing detailed examinations of systems, structures, and engine components. Parts of the engine have been identified, and so some of the examination will take place on scene, and eventually the pieces that can be moved will go for later analysis. Maintenance records at the operator's headquarters in Las Vegas will be examined tomorrow. In Washington, D.C., there are ATC engineers actually reviewing the radar data that are available, and tomorrow interviews with initial eyewitnesses will be conducted. We are planning for an update briefing probably tomorrow afternoon. The way to know about the time and location is to follow the NTSB either on Twitter, twitter.com/NTSB, or at our website, ntsb.gov, or you can be in contact with our public affairs officers, Peter Knutson over here by the door and Keith Holloway behind the camera right here. Finally, before we take some questions, we just want to thank the first responders again. National Park Service, Las Vegas Metro, we've just had great cooperation from folks, and we really appreciate their effort thus far in the accident investigation. So we have some time for a few questions.
You talked about the parts that you're going to be able to examine. How are you planning on getting those out of that canyon area, and then do they stay here to be examined, or do you take them somewhere else?
So the question is about the parts that are in the canyon and how much of them are going to be examined there. Are they moved? Bill, do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. That still remains to be determined what we'll need to take out of there. It is a little bit difficult to get some things out of the canyon, but Park Service is there helping us with some equipment.
So do you lift it out by air, though, or do you take it on ATV? Or
depends on the size of the part. We could probably get it out by ground. Yeah.
And partially that's a good question also, because earlier today people asked about the remoteness of the site. And we're talking about having to take an ATV and another 150-yard hike and then climbing what is now available as a 10-foot ladder basically to get to the site. So it's a good question, because it's not like you're just taking things in and putting them in the back of a station wagon.
Were there any flight data recorders or like a black box or anything like that on this particular aircraft?
So the question is whether any flight data recorders or black box. That's one of the things that we're looking at. So meeting with the operators, we'll be trying to understand exactly what's on the aircraft.
Is it standard for there to be some kind of recording device on this particular aircraft?
Is it standard to have that kind of device or recording device on these aircrafts? No, it's not. But there have been recommendations from the NTSB about this. So that's one of the things we have to find out, is because very often people will act and do those things even though they're not required.
Mark, you mentioned witnesses, initial witnesses. How many?
The question was about how many initial witnesses. We're still working on that. For example, we know at least 2 people have already contacted Bill English, and the NTSB investigators already make distinctions between eyewitnesses and ear witnesses. As you know, some people saw smoke, other people heard things. So we know there are a couple that have already contacted Bill, but we think there are more folks that are out there. So our human factors people will start those interviews tomorrow.
You begged the question. You said at least 2 witnesses differentiated by sound and sight. Were these 2 by sound or sight, or one of each?
As far as we know, initially there was one of each. And the reason I say at the moment, that's because we've heard that there are other eyewitnesses out there. So we'll coordinate with National Park Service and others that have gotten contact as well. Any other questions?
Were any of the remains recovered today?
Were any of the remains recovered today? And that's something that the Clark County Coroner's Office, you should contact them about details.
Can you tell us anything about the history of this aircraft nationwide? What type of history they have mechanically, or in terms of any types of crashes, pattern at all?
So the question is about the history of the aircraft. We don't have anything about that right now, but I can tell you a history of the aircraft, accidents, all of that will be part of the review that will go on. So right now, if you think about it, we're, again, barely a few hours in, and we're really focused on any kind of perishable information or other things on scene. So that will absolutely go on. When I mentioned that, final report could take 9 to 12 months, that's the kind of stuff that takes a long time to get into, to look at. Don't forget, we're focused on this accident here now and trying to determine, again, not just what happened, but why, so we can issue recommendations so this kind of accident doesn't happen again. But we're going to be looking at that, absolutely.
Can you talk to us about response procedure? Obviously, yesterday, for overnight, everything was left kind of as is because it was so dark. Are there any challenges that investigators will face knowing now that the scene was not processed immediately after the accident?
So the question is what challenges there might be by having the wreckage there overnight before we could get there. There's certainly some perishable issues, but I don't know, Bill, is there anything specific you'd be concerned about?
In this case, not really, actually. The conditions here are pretty good for preservation. It's dry. The area is not open to unauthorized people. It's pretty remote, and there's some good security there. So far, we haven't really got any issues with that.
Could it pose challenges to the coroner's office?
That's the coroner.
And so the question was, could that pose challenges to the coroner's office? And again, the Clark County coroners would be the ones to ask about that.
Take one more question.
Mr. Rosecon, I want to ask if you will release a photo. You described the site, thank you. Can you release a photo so we can get a visual image of what it is you're describing?
And the question was whether we can get a photo released, and we're working on that right now. And there have been several folks already taking photos. Our understanding is it's actually been better visually to get the images from on the ground rather than from the air. And so we're working on trying to figure out what the best photos that we can make available to you. And Peter would be the guy to be in touch with when those become available.